Welcome to episode 43.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice, where we take an in-depth look at voiceovers.
It's a new year, and if you're like me, you are already thinking about warmer weather and taking that getaway to that tropical or exotic destination. Maybe you plan to travel to Walt Disney World or Universal Studios. No matter what kind of trip you plan, 3D Travel Company is the company for you. Just visit 3dtravelcompany.com and let them know that Trenton sent you from Who Did That Voice. Or you can book on www.whodidthatvoice.co and click the Book Now button. For a limited time, Who Did That Voice listeners can receive a Disney gift card for qualifying Disney and Universal trips booked and traveled by the end of 2017. Book today and travel away.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. All February long of 2017, we will be covering the original Deke-released Sailor Moon animated series from the 1990s. And today's special guest is Darien, also known as Tuxedo Mask.
Yeah, better than ever now that I bumped into you.
Oh.
I've been waiting for someone like you to come into my life.
Oh, Darien, I'm so happy.
Me too. Wow, this lake is really beautiful.
Yeah, I can't believe they're gonna cover it all in concrete.
Huh?
They're gonna fill it all in for an office building.
That's terrible. Pretty soon there won't be a green space left in this whole city.
You wanna go see the flowers?
Yeah, I hear the rose garden's amazing. I'd like to see it before it's destroyed. Be strong, Sailor Moon. You can defeat her. Thank you. I hate bees. Appreciate it, Meatball Head.
Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show we have Toby Proctor joining us. Toby, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Toby, the very first thing we always like to do when we start out with one of our special guests is to get a little background on them. And how did you get into the voiceover industry?
Well, I'd been an actor since I was, professionally, I think I was about 7 or 8 years old. I started out on stage and I really didn't think I'd ever do voice work. It's not something that I knew really was out there. And having been a singer, and then I had done some television series stuff in my early teens, I was definitely immersed in the business, but I, again, didn't really have a knowledge of the voiceover industry. It was only until I was 19 or 20, and the woman who was the original Sailor Moon and original director of Sailor Moon, Tracy Moore, she was doing a little, it was like a microphone technique course. And my dad at the time said, look, if you want to take the course, I'll help you out. And I think it was like $200, but again, I was 20 and didn't have it. Yeah. I did the course. I did a few sessions with her, and she said, look, if you work on your reading, you could probably do this for a career. And I'm like, we'll see. I was 20. When you get advice at 20, you generally don't really take it. But luckily, I got it was an audition about a week after one of the courses, and I didn't know what it was for. I read a paragraph or two and walked away. And a few minutes later, my agent called me and said, hey, congratulations, you got Sailor Moon. I'm like, that's great. What's Sailor Moon? And it turns out that she was actually casting for that series. I just didn't know it, but she had already knew that she was going to bring me in for this. So it was definitely right place, right time.
Well, that is fantastic. And, I was going to dive into that, but I'm glad that you kind of brought it up first. That show started back in 1995, and with playing Tuxedo Mask, so you were the original voice of Tuxedo Mask, correct?
Rita Romano was the very first English dub Tuxedo Mask for only 9 episodes, I think it was. And he ended up leaving the show I think he went to New York. He's a big voice guy, great guy. But it was just something that he couldn't continue with his schedule. And then that's why they called me in to replace me. And in fact, I was just talking to Roland Parliament, who was technically my director for most of the series. And I believe he was one of the guys also auditioning me. And he said that in his knowledge, I was the only guy that they brought in, which is a really strange thing because usually, you have some competition. And at the time, but I had just recently had booked the voice of Flash Gordon in the city same week. So I went from having zero, voiceover experience to holding 2 leads on 2 shows.
Wow.
And it was yeah, I mean, definitely that was lightning striking for sure. But I think it may have been that why I was a direct booking almost. Like they just said, hey, listen, why don't you bring him in? And luckily enough, I got the role, and we talk here 20 some odd years later.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, that was the first anime for me growing up that I ever really recall watching. Not that I didn't see glimpses of other things, but it's the first one that I really latched onto and just had a fascination with it for some reason. And I loved, the whole thing between Tuxedo Mask and Sailor Moon and, Artemis and all the different cats and all the Sailor Scouts. It was a fantastic show. And it was very unique because we really hadn't had a whole lot of immersion into anime back 20 years ago. So
yeah, it's a weird thing. I've been asked on many occasions what it was about this series. I mean, if it could be replicated, it would have been done by now, and it was the right time, right place. I think also too at Girl Power, which is very great to have, superheroes that were not only strong, but they were also imperfect. So they weren't like this ideal thing. And I think that's what a lot of people identified with, male and female. And, for a lot of the brothers that couldn't steal the remote back, they ended up liking the show, whether they liked it or not. So
yeah. Like you said, they weren't like a Superman where they were perfect. They were superheroines, heroines, but they then also had their troubles at school and I'm in love with a boy or whatever was going on. So it gave that realistic real life aspect. Plus, hey, I'm a superhero too. So I think that is a huge element to why the show was such a huge success.
Yeah, it's a funny one. It's something that I've always asked myself, and the other castmates. I know you interviewed Linda Ballantyne, who's a dear friend of mine, and I've been able to travel the world with her in regards to Sailor Moon, and it's a funny thing. I never knew. Heck, we didn't even know it was played in Australia, let alone when they, you go there like, oh my God, Sailor Moon, yeah, like that's it's like how it's you can't assume that kind of success,
Yeah.
So.
And you as a voice actor, I know a lot of times you don't understand the impact you've had on society or people because you record it and then a year later or something it comes out, and then so you're not like on stage like an actor who's doing a performance, a play or something where they see and they get the reaction right then and there. And so it's a little bit different with voiceover, and sometimes the impact and the reach you have is unimaginable.
I think that in not just voice acting, but any type of acting. I mean, you're broadcasting. It's a megaphone, right? And yeah, there's definitely. I mean, having been in the business a long time, of course, I know there's a certain impact, but you really never know what reach you have. I mean, you're right. You're in a room recording on a microphone, usually alone. You walk away. There's no applause. And it's only, now years later where you get to meet people and hear about their experiences. And, we've had a lot of people who, live rurally and they don't have a lot of friends. And that was something that, a lot of times I've been told like, wow, you're my best friend because I didn't really have lots of friends around, but I loved your voice. And that's just something that I don't care how cool you are. You can never assume something like that.
Yeah.
It really is an honor.
Absolutely. I'm sure it blows you away, the stories that you hear from different fans at cons and those kind of things. So
every day, honestly, there's it's incredible. There's there's stories from years ago. There was a woman who got in touch with my agency, and because her daughter was a big fan. She was 8. Her name was Diana Tolan, and I remember my agency saying, "Hey, listen, can you do us a favor? Just call this girl for her birthday. Come up to the agency, and we'll make the call from there and say, hey, happy birthday, it's Tuxedo Mask,' kind of thing." And I did that, and then a few years ago, I was in Los Angeles at the LA Anime Expo. And somehow through Twitter, a friend of a friend got us in touch with each other. And it turned out that she was about to get married. And so I got to meet up with her in LA and meet her husband-to-be and toast their upcoming wedding nuptials. It was such a surreal experience to think that I said happy birthday to this 8-year-old girl. And now she's lived her life and she's about to get married and she's still a diehard fan.
That's fantastic. I mean, what a story.
It's
Absolutely.
nuts. Yeah, it's nuts.
Wow. Well, you know,
Yeah.
you mentioned Linda Ballantyne, and
Yep.
did you get a chance to work with, I know you guys worked separate on the show and it was more
Yep.
solo recording, but did you get a chance to know Katie Griffin or Susan Roman?
Yeah, those are two other people that I've traveled quite extensively with, and I've also known I've known mostly Katie through the years through acting. I've worked in and out of casting as well, and so sometimes I would be in the casting room. She'd audition, which is hilarious because she's incredibly talented. I didn't ever work with them in the room because as Tuxedo Mask they had me just singularly in the room, but in the hallways you'd pass by and like, oh hey, you're Katie, right? I'm like, yeah, and through the years we definitely kept touch, but I'd say that in the last 3-4 years we've definitely seen a lot of each other and grown to be very close friends.
Well, that's fantastic. I know from talking with the other ladies that I've spoken with, the ones I've mentioned, they've all seemed like, even though y'all recorded separately, there's just a very family-oriented bond between you guys. And I feel that with voiceover artists as a whole anyway. But you guys up there that did Sailor Moon, it just seems like y'all have a really strong bond, and that's awesome.
Well, I think I think we're all just so shocked by the immense success and the fact that something we've done is kind of locked in pop culture. It's a really weird thing. I did a talk at a college up here a few days ago, and at the end, there was a girl that came up with my little Tuxedo Mask pop figure for me to sign, and it's just not something I think of on a daily level because it's just a job I did a long time ago, and it's still like, wow, crazy, okay. And she, so she went out to the store and got that thing, and and it's just, yeah, it's really incredible.
Yeah, I actually have not picked up the Tuxedo Mask yet, but I was actually planning to get the whole set for Sailor
if you wait
Moon.
months, I'm sure it's going to be cheaper, so that's great.
But yeah, that's fantastic that she was able to get that signed. Well, Toby, I know you've done all kinds of different, projects in acting and animation. And what is it like doing voiceover for an animation versus like a video game, like when you were on Mega Man Legends 2, where you voiced Glide?
That's so funny. Okay, because that's a really good one. Okay, so I was at a convention in Alabama about 2 years ago, a thing called Comic-Con, and great guys who run it. And I was signing some stuff for Sailor Moon, and then some guy put in front of my face Mega Man 2, right? And I'm like, okay. And he could tell by my reaction that I probably didn't know what was going on. And he's like, well, you're in it, right? You're Glide. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I did this when I was really busy between Flash Gordon and Sailor Moon. There was times where I'd be in a room and they'd just throw a piece of paper in front of you. I didn't know what it was. So I actually, for a long time, didn't even know I was in that game. How crazy is that?
That is pretty wild.
Yeah. So but to answer your question, the difference between video game voices and normal voiceovers, I mean, I would say it's pretty well known that doing video game voices is a lot more arduous. There's a huge uproar right now about the performance matters movement. I have lots of friends, Yuri Lowenthal, who's a huge voice actor. He's kind of championing some of this stuff, and it's interesting because doing an episodic, like just normal voiceover animation project, you have your bumpers, then you have your 3 acts, then you have your Taylor, and you're out. And you just as long as you do your lines well, there you go. But for video games, you're building these massive libraries, and so it's really taxing. In fact, I haven't had a lot of experience. I have friends very close to me, Ivan Sherry, who's in Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs 2 right now. I mean, when they do their libraries, they have sometimes could be an 8-hour session. And you think, okay, you get stabbed, like, right? But then they'll actually say, okay, stab right arm, stab left arm, stab, knee. And apparently that's a different sound. So it's really, it's quite the marathon. And it's a huge difference between doing normal animation.
Well, it definitely sounds like it takes a lot of thinking and, kind of processing, how would I sound if I just got stabbed in this area versus that area.
Sure.
And just the different kinds of things that they would have to go through that on a regular basis, or if it was happening in real time, it would be one thing, but I would bet it's a lot more arduous when it's, come up with this right now, you've been stabbed here. And you're like,
Yeah. And it's not even just the art of, kind of dreaming up what it might sound like. It's also the architecture of your vocal cords, because there's only so much you can do, and in fact that's why this movement is quite huge. The performance matters thing is just to make sure that these people are being careful. It's kind of like stunt pay in a way. Yeah. You know, it's so, because if you blow your voice on a job, well, for 3 weeks you probably won't be able to audition, and there goes some people. That could be a series, you don't know. You know, and it's we're all very fortunate to work in this industry, but there still has to be some kind of idea of safety. And I that's about the only thing. I don't want to get too serious about it, but I think that it is important that everybody kind of gets the level playing field and everybody kind of play safe.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Toby, and I have definitely supported that movement with hashtag Performance Matters. So, but you know, it's you know, it is good to have those industry standards so that people know that they're protected and safe and that they can continue to work, because being out for 3 or 4 weeks could be detrimental to people. So,
you know, and in all fairness too, this is all new. I mean, really, it's only been the last 10 years really that it's been like hardcore game voices, and because the animation is caught up to what these writers have been able to dream up. Yeah. So now that basically anything is possible, well, because that is possible, you know, that just means that there's going to be more vocal opportunities, but just more stuff.
Well, I mean, like when we had the original Mario, all we had was a little bit of a soundtrack going on with some characters and some sound effects. And as we've gotten more and more into it, we're having full-blown stories that sometimes I feel are more in-depth and more deep than even some animated shows or feature films, because of how much time they put into it, because they want people to who play those games to feel like it's part of that universe for that show, or part of whatever they're doing to make its own universe or whatever. And they do an amazing job, but yeah. It's
only going to get deeper. It's, I mean, I've seen some technology, some of the VR stuff that's going around. It's mind blowing. And you know, it's going to be, yet again, it's going to be something like going from Mario 8-bit to whatever. Like really, if you just look at the scale of animation we've seen in our lifetime, it's incredible. So what do you think? 20 years from now, it's going to be, you're going to want to hold stuff that you see, you know? It's crazy.
You're going to become the character in the virtual world. It's going to like put a skin over you, and then you're going to have the voice of the actor.
Oh yeah, I know. It can be totally done.
So it's crazy. Well, in 2014, you actually played a mallard duck named Willie. And what kind of character was he, and what was the premise of that South Korean animated movie you played in?
Well, it was originally titled Leafy, and it was an award-winning film that they really felt would be worth dubbing into English. And I auditioned for it. And it was one quick little audition, and then I found out that I got Willie. He was the lead mallard duck in this, and it was kind of a story, a coming-to-age story of basically, you know, he was kind of a teenage duck, and if you can imagine that, and and basically it was like, you know, leaving the roost, like what it's going to be like, and wanting. It was the dichotomy between wanting freedom but also needing home at the same time, and so it was that story of just kind of maybe being a little too naive and rough and not really accepting his mom's love. But of course, at the end, they reunite and everything. Maturity sets in. But it was really interesting. It was actually one of the very first jobs that I almost fainted in for real, because sometimes you do passes of scenes, and it was an intercut scene where I had this huge duck fight where I was being chased by these, bad birds, and so I had to flap my wings like crazy, and I hyperventilated apparently, and I didn't know it because I was so into the character. I was, flapping through cornfields and flying high and all that stuff, and I was so into it that when they called cut after like a 7-minute pass, I was standing, and there was thank goodness there was a stool there, because I just laid down and I just basically huddled over this stool, and I was seconds away from going out. Because I fainted before, and I know that feeling, and it was crazy.
Wow, man, that shows an actor who's really putting their all into voice acting. And for those of you listening, it takes just as much, if not more, energy to do vocalizations and voiceover for these different projects. So, wow. I mean, that's an amazing story.
I have to agree. That's the one thing about acting versus voice acting is different. You've lost a dimension when you're in voice. If they can't see you, you have to. You have to add something to it in order for it to be as emphatic.
Yeah,
for sure.
Or to make the same kind of impact as you visually see it versus just hearing it. So, wow, that's amazing. I mean, you definitely put your all into that.
No, it was surprising.
And it sounds like a great project. I haven't gotten a chance to watch it yet, but it definitely sounds like something I would love to watch. And it sounds like it has a good story.
Yeah, it's quite beautiful, the animation. I was pleasantly surprised when we had the working copy during the dub. Of course, the color correction wasn't done, and all the engineering and mastering wasn't done. And I still liked it, but when I saw the final product, I was like, wow, this looks great, because it looks like traditional cell animation, a little bit more Disney-ish, which is kind of cool too. It's different.
I love cell animation. Those are, in my opinion, some of the most beautiful ever done. So. Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, what are some of the other voiceover projects that you've had a chance to work on besides some of the ones that we've mentioned, Toby?
Geez, I did Busy World of Richard Scarry. I've done some, there's a show up here called Turbo Dogs. I got to be this kind of cool dog. It was neat. Little young yappy thing. It was fun. And what does he sound like? Oh boy, I always want to be a turbo dog. Something like that. And Forget About It. There's a series up here. I don't know if you guys get that down there, but it's kind of like a mob. It's like a mob family that's been relocated into the middle of nowhere. So I got to play this kind of derelict guy, Jim, or what was his? Geez, what was his name? I just remember he always used to, hey, Mr. Jimmy, this guy is back, back alley and stuff, and it's great ideas and whatever. So that was definitely a fun character to play. Truth be told, I'm definitely known for Tuxedo Mask, but I've done way more on camera than I have voice stuff. So
okay.
That's kind of more my area, or has been, yeah.
Well, it's fantastic that we got to dive into some of those different stories and talk with you. And I'm glad I was able to kind of surprise you with some of the stuff I brought up today. I always like to kind of catch people off guard if I can, and sometimes the reactions are just priceless.
Yeah, no, it's fun. Yeah, that glide one threw me for sure.
Awesome. Well, what kind of advice, Toby, would you give to somebody who might be looking at pursuing a voiceover career for themselves?
Well, I would say honestly, I don't really know now. I don't know a lot of people who solely just do voice. I think they've started out doing either, community theater, and they worked their way into doing commercial work of some sort. And then somehow their agent kind of pushed them into that area of voice work because it's such a select industry, right?
Yeah.
I would say workshops are a really good thing. That's kind of how, for me, that was my thing. I was lucky enough to get in front of somebody who was not only amazing, because she was like in the Care Bears, Tracy Moore, but she was in casting. And so she knows what they look for. And ultimately she was, the one to kind of get me into that position. So I think doing voiceover workshops would be the smartest thing, because you are literally rubbing elbows with the people who actually do it for real. That's something that I think is definitely a good thing. But I would also say make sure that this is something you want to do, because if it is, it's going to take a lot. But I wish them the best, and I only hope good things for them, because it is, if you're lucky enough to get to do this stuff. I still would love to do more voice, even though I have some credits to my name. Voice is a really special job, and it's a lot of fun. But I would say, yeah, and just a more detailed a bit of advice: if you do get the chance to do voice work, make sure you read everything. Like, don't just read the character that you've been given, read the other characters too, because that will completely shape who your character is and how you react to them. And I've fallen into that where it's like, I'm so into my character, but then I wasn't really realizing who I was talking to, and that's a detriment. So read everything. That's what I'd say.
Absolutely. Well, that is fantastic. And you are right. By reading the other lines before and after you do get a better grasp of the character, because I've done high school theater and different things. And you're right. You don't really get the full picture of your character until you know the full picture.
That's right. Yeah, it's true.
Because you're one piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. It's easy to think that you are the puzzle, but yeah, no, you're right.
Absolutely. Well, Toby, do you have a website or social media or a way people can reach out to you and talk to you? Or
I have a Twitter account that I usually use for most of that kind of stuff. Just recently, I've started a company with some buddies who are also animation guys. A guy named Christian Potenza, who I don't know if you know Total Drama, if you've ever heard of that show. It was a Canadian series here. It got quite a lot of play in the U.S. and 16 and whatever else. But anyways, there's a YouTube channel that we're kind of working stuff on right now, and it's called the Switchboard Network. And it's basically it's just a way that I can get into doing some production stuff again. We post a lot of our studio stuff and some behind the scenes stuff with switchboard sessions, which we have vocal classes, or we have shorts, we have all that kind of stuff. We even have some documentaries that are going on, but that's basically it on YouTube. It would be the Switchboard Network, and or the Twitter, which is at Toby Proctor.
Okay, absolutely. And
yeah,
what is your favorite cartoon character from growing up, and why, Toby?
That's a good one. Geez, favorite cartoon character. Oh, it's tough.
If you've got more than one, it's okay.
Okay. Well, I recently just worked with the lead animators from Hanna-Barbera, Willie Ito and Tony Benedict. These were the original guys who penned these things, and we were able to work with these guys in spring, I think it was. And just before we were leaving, he's like, "Hey, would you like me to draw you something?" I'm like, "Okay." And I started getting nervous. I was like, "What?" and there he was. And within a few strokes of a pen, he drew Scooby-Doo. And I'm like, but it was like the real Scooby-Doo. Like, these were the guys that drew those things for real. And I swear, within it didn't look like anything until he did one little thing. And it was like, I saw Scooby-Doo right in front of me, and it's from the guys who dreamt them up. And it was kind of cool. So I would say probably Scooby-Doo. I mean, it was always, those meddling kids that took over the town. And I think that would have been it. And being able to meet these guys, it was really cool.
That was fantastic that you were able to meet them and get to have them draw there in front of you. That's wow. What a story.
Yeah. We got to work with them for the weekend and really kind of tap their brain. And it was just something for sure.
Wow. That is definitely a treat for anybody. I would imagine. And I would have probably felt the same way. Very honored to be amongst those guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually kind of a neat event because we actually did a live dubbing of an original Hanna-Barbera thing called Yacky Doodle, and there's the fox, there was the Alfred Hitchcockian alligator, and then there was me, this little bird, and we did a live. It was probably in front of 300 people maybe, but we did a live dub, no guide whatsoever, projected in front of everybody and in front of the people who made this. Like, these guys were the original animators in the 60s of this exact animation project, and to do that in front of them was so nerve-wracking. And they were so gracious at the end. They said we did a great job, and it was a really interesting project.
Wow, a live dub. That would be fantastic to see something like that. I would pay for that.
Yeah, it was cool.
Wow, that's awesome, Toby. Well, I have one final question for you today.
Sure.
And the question is, what is the legacy you want to leave behind?
Wow. Well, you know what? I just want for me to listen. It's hard to say because I've been doing this before I even knew what business was. It was show to me. I didn't know what show business was. I think if people, for whatever reason, found enjoyment in whatever I did, if there's anything that kind of maybe gave them a little escapism in a bad day, that's good enough for me. I don't really have any lofty goals. I don't want to be a giant star here. I mean, if something happens, that's great. That's a byproduct. But it really is. I would say as long as I made a difference in someone's tiny little day, I think that's enough for me, and it's been a heck of an honor so far.
Well, Toby, thank you so much for being on the show today. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you. Would you give us a closeout today as Tuxedo Mask?
Sure, guys. This is Toby Proctor, the voice of Tuxedo Mask, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice? Thanks, meatball heads.
Hey, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Toby Proctor, the voice of Tuxedo Mask. And if you did, please stop on by my Contact Me page at www.whodidthatvoice.co. I'd love to hear from you. You know, a question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the Episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us this Friday for our next special guest, Susan Roman, the voice of Sailor Jupiter. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.